Great. Welcome to Callout, Tom. So my argument today is both kind of complicated and fairly radical. I've got 15 minutes to make my case and defend it, so I beg some leniency and judging criteria today. Please consider the resolution not to be an immediate call for political action. Please take it as a best future economic strategy for prosperous and just world, a long-term goal to deal with a long-term challenge. Should we look at this resolution or this solution, or should we turn to another one? So what is universal basic income? Every citizen from birth is awarded a monthly income. The amount is calculated to be enough to meet or be close to meeting very basic needs: food, minimal shelter, minimal transportation costs, minimal communication costs. The goal is to ensure that no one starves or goes homeless, but for their own foolishness. It gives young people, even the poor, starting capital in our economy. It gives the disabled, the unemployed, or the unemployable basic subsistence, and the freedom to sell their labor at any price the market will support. UBI would be funded by taxation. All income over the UBI level would be taxed at proportional rate sufficient to cover the UBI and other government expenses. Nearly all other forms of welfare or wealth redistribution would be eliminated, with the possible exception of catastrophic health insurance. So at this point, I'll stop, see if you have any questions for clarification.
None. Oh, sorry.
Okay, so what are our basic challenges? The forces of robotic and AI automation and the wealth begets wealth nature of capitalist market economies are creating a world where unskilled labor is of ever declining marginal value compared to the standard cost of living. Eventually, the most essential work will be done better by automated systems rather than by human beings. Capitalism has always struggled with what to do about those who fail to rise up the ladder and achieve financial stability or success. Be they the elderly, disabled, poor, unambitious, or just plain dumb, a competitive market leaves the losers in bad shape. Yet there's still fundamentally human beings who desire food, shelter, and the basics of life. There's also a disparity in workers versus capital owners when it comes to negotiating the value of labor. Labor has a guns to its head, either work or starve, while capital owners have the leeway and wealth to negotiate and hold out in bargaining positions. This means people have to sell their labor for less than it's really worth. Welfare efforts, meanwhile, to address these problems in mixed economies are often complicated and inefficient. They're also inherently unfair in that they target specific individuals. A lot of money is spent administrating them as well, making them inefficient. UBI offers answers to all of these challenges. It ensures that everybody has enough income, at least to eat and find modest shelter, regardless of the value of their labor. It gives both workers a better negotiating position, similar to capital owners, but also allows people to work at any value their skills can command. If their labor is only worth $2 an hour, it can still make sense for them to work for that rate, since they will not starve, but they're still gaining income. It is still, if it's not worth their time, they can freely refuse and they won't starve or go homeless. This also allows students to work as apprentices or other people to take jobs where the main benefit of the work is training for higher paid work down the road. It allows would-be entrepreneurs or investors who have some means of support during the early stages of their work. In short, it makes everyone more free to make optimal choices in their life. It also eliminates the unfairness of and most of the administrative costs of traditional welfare programs. Final thoughts. It is the rise of AI automation that makes UBI, Universal Basic Income, most necessary, and it also makes it possible. It is true that the cost of UBI would be significant, but the productivity of automation is likewise monumental. Because it will do significant damage to the ability of the poor and unskilled and the unexceptional, we should use these gains to offset the damage. This frees people to contribute as much as they are able in society and still have a meaningful place, even if AI robots ultimately do more work than they could ever achieve for the nation's wealth and power.
Thank you. Today, I will be running a single contention case on the lack of economic viability between UBI. Before I get into that first and final and single contention, first, some clash. The biggest issue with automation currently is the displacement of other careers. This is true. We've seen it throughout history in the Industrial Revolution. However, the fact is that historically speaking, although there has been some short-term lapses in the economy, there's always bounce back as new careers come into place. For example, in the 2 years after the major industrial revolution, we did see a lot of displacement, but after that we saw innovation. It's just a necessary state of change that will always be part of the picture. Secondly, you state the fact that the current amount of bureaucracy involved with welfare systems is at an unacceptable level. I would agree with this. I'm not necessarily defending the status quo, but I think we need to do a better job of making more specialized welfare and making that less bureaucratic, rather than the wastefulness of ensuring that everybody gets this money when very few truly need it. So, with that being said, a welfare state is a welfare state by any other name. Forced charity to help those who are entirely unable to help themselves is at least morally acceptable. The moral high ground is still there. But when this welfare state gives money to those who are also completely able to help themselves and are completely self-sufficient, then we are simply wasting money and creating an unnecessary amount of bureaucracy for no added benefit and many magnitudes of increased costs. This cannot stand. Yeah, sorry.
No problem. So let me respond to those. We can talk about bouncing back, and yes, the economies and things have changed in response to automation over the years. The Industrial Revolution was a huge change, created a lot of displacement. Eventually, we found some ways to come back from that. The information age was also a huge change. We found some ways to come back from that. But each time we have one of these cycles, we see the income disparity and the wealth disparity between the rich and the poor exacerbate further, and we see the income of an average and lower middle class things erode versus those who are capital owners at the top of the system. Capitalism naturally concentrates money and wealth to those who own capital. It takes money to make money. And over time, that accumulation of wealth in the upper end of the economy becomes problematic for the overall society, unless there is some mechanism by which the wealth created can come back down to those who are just starting the cycle over again without necessarily being born into a rich or powerful family. Right? UBI is a mechanism to create a constant and specific churn in the wealth in the economy, to move it from the top, from not specifically from wealthy people, right? That's not the idea, but from the accumulation of the capital and the value of the capital itself down to the labor market and to individual people, right? So it is taking the benefit of the very cream of the crop and giving it to all of society. And it's not like welfare. It's not going to just the people who can't make it. It's going to everybody, everybody's children. Everybody gets the money. Now, you may need it less when you're wealthy. It may not be as essential to you if you're doing very well in the economy, but it will still be helpful. You'll still be able to spend that money. So it is not targeted. It is demographically evenly distributed money. It doesn't just go to the poor. It goes to everybody. Now, of course, money pays for money. So where does the money come from? It comes from wherever the money is, whoever happens to have it, that's where it will be coming from. So the better you're doing in the economy, or more you're going to contribute to the overall success of everybody and give everyone, the idea is America's a land of opportunity. This is giving a guaranteed amount of opportunity to everybody in the country. It's not wasteful because it's a very simple process. You can, especially in the information age, you can set up accounts. You just automatically debit the appropriate amount of money each month into an individual's account based on their social security number or other form of identification. And that's it. There's very little administration needed. There's no means testing. You're not chasing people around. You're not making sure they're spending it frugally. That's up to them to whether or not to use the money effectively or not. But it guarantees everybody has that opportunity and that chance. Is it expensive? Yes, perhaps, but it is entirely more efficient and it is incredibly more fair. In a poor society without robots and industrialization and artificial intelligence, these things may not make a lot of sense, but in the future, when these things become robust enough to take over most of our jobs, they will not only make sense, but it'll be necessary.
So the fact is, it is too expensive. You state that's not. You say, where will the money come from? You will say it comes from wherever the money is. However, so these are Canadian statistics, as I'm from Canada, so slightly different, but within the same realm of possibility and reasonability. The current amount of tax that the average citizen pays in Canada right now per year that goes towards, for everything, is 4,114 Canadian dollars. If we guarantee a UBI of, say, $10,000, it is just too much. And yes, there are richer citizens, and yes, there are businesses that do contribute far more than 4,114 in taxes. But the biggest risk at this point is that those people simply leaving the country, because UBI will not catch on everywhere, at least not immediately. So, and when all these enter giant corporations see that they have to pay this astronomical amount more money within this nation, they are certainly going to go elsewhere and take their business elsewhere. This will lead to economic collapse like we have never seen it before. Currently, so if we guarantee $10,000 per person for the 35 million people, for the population of Canada, that equates to $350 billion total dollars necessary to fund this program per year. Currently, in terms of welfare type systems, we have 45 billion going to elderly benefits, 19 billion going to employment insurance, and 18 going to children related benefits. This is 82. So we will need to jump taxes by 4.3 times their current level, simply to achieve this arbitrary idea of giving money to everybody. Where if we only give it to the bottom 20% of the population and simply work on economic incentives, reduce bureaucracy, we'll simply be wasting less money. Because right now, we cannot afford to jump the taxes by 4.3 times their current level. It's simply just not an economically viable thing to do. Yeah. Oh.
To respond to that, we've got 2 points here that are pretty important. One is costs, overall costs, right? So you have to ask yourself, can we afford it? Well, can a wealthy, powerful nation, let's say the USA, the most powerful on earth, manage to meet the basic subsistence needs of every individual in the population? I think ostensibly and obviously that is true, we can. If you were to ask that question about, say, Ethiopia or India, the answer might be no. India because it has a massive population, Ethiopia because it has a small economy. But the United States, obviously, we could manage to do that. We come pretty close to doing it already. It's not like, and you have to think of money in an economy as a cyclical system. It's not a lump sum game. It's not like this money that we give to people just disappears. It just gets spent. Like you transfer that money to those people, they spend it in the economy, they buy goods and services, they pay rent, they do other things with it, it goes back into businesses, it becomes income, the income gets taxed, it goes to the government, it goes back to the people. It is a cyclical process. It's the same with the money you make in the private industry. You go to your jobs. How could American industry afford to pay all the people for the work they do? Well, because the work they do produces things and it goes around, and it's a cyclical economy. So it's not like we're just dumping this money out of the economy and spreading it away somewhere. It's cycling back around. Yes, that means that when you get income, a portion of it is going to be siphoned away. And yes, the taxes would absolutely be higher in such a society. Those who are very wealthy and are very successful in the economy will have to contribute to this process. But the benefits are widespread because it creates greater economic opportunity and activity in the country. It engages everybody to be able to work. Right now, what happens is, because of automation, I can have a robot that do a job. And if I want a human to do it, like the robot can do it for $3 an hour, the human, I have to pay, $10 an hour minimum wage. That doesn't make sense. The human being couldn't work for $3 an hour because they wouldn't make a living. They might as well just, be subsistence or hunt around in garbage cans. Are going to do better than they would at that low wage. But if they have a guaranteed base income, they could work for $3 an hour and compete with robots in that sense, because they wouldn't be entirely dependent upon the value of their labor for being able to survive. They would have this basic level. So that frees the economy, really encourages capitalism, and allows people whose labor, let's be frank, may not be as good as the robots or the AI are going to be in the future, which are going to be driving our cars and flying our planes and making analytical decisions, making business investment ideas. They're already doing these things to some degree. That is going to continue to increase because it makes a lot of sense and it makes us all wealthy, and we can achieve a lot more economic efficiency. And it's that economic power and turbine is going to drive this ability to be able to pay for these things. So yes, it's a big cost, but there's a big benefit to it. I'll talk about risk of capital flight and personal flight in another rebuttal.
So although it may be true that if we can manage to maintain the system for a long enough time, that the economic benefits will outweigh the drawbacks. But the fact is, the only way that we can do this right now, with those numbers being as they are, is either not providing that basic level and just providing some money to those who need it, or if we provide the amount of money that would be necessary for people to live an acceptable life, then we are running a deficit, and we are running a deficit in the magnitude that it will not last. And it just simply will not last us long enough. You can't run a deficit that is that big of a deficit for that long and still have a nation, still have an economy to work with. It simply just doesn't work. If a UBI of $10,000 is guaranteed, and we assume an extremely high flat tax rate of 1/3, then a family of 4 with a total income of $120,000 will be the first break-even point where they are no longer at the expense of other taxpayers. This is already far above the average citizen. Because of the fact that under this system, only those over 60% of the population break even, they would have to pay 4.8 times the current taxes. And so with taxes this high, the only people that can afford to contribute to this system in a positive way are not going to wish to. They're going to leave the country, they're going to immigrate to another nation, and they're going to leave the nation in a state where it is not able to pay for this program, and it is just simply not able to execute it. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with this system in terms of like social issues. It's just simply the fact that on an economic level, it is not self-sustaining. And a non-self-sustaining economic system is one that we can simply not implement. Because if it is not sustainable in the long term, then we have no reasoning and no desire to continue a system based upon it.
Right. So I'm going to grant you that in our current economic condition, the way things are today, a full UBI where everybody has the basic needs met by this payment is probably not possible. And that's why at the beginning of the debate, I tried to make pains to frame this as a future debate. It's a very complicated topic, it's a complicated subject, and obviously we're not going to be able to do it right now, but we're trying to be future looking here. We're looking at the trends in the economy, the way technology and society are developing, the problems that we've had in the past, and trying to look forward to a road by which we can address these problems and achieve a kind of optimal economy that both doesn't leave anybody behind, but creates a dynamic capitalist system and a market economy where people are making wise economic decisions for themselves, the best economic decisions with their money to make their lives the way they want them to be, right? That's the goal that we have, and to have overall prosperity. As I said, the kinds of automation, the threat that automation poses to lower skilled workers is both the problem and the solution, right? It's better because actually with less capital investment, you get more productivity, right? But the problem is it leaves some people behind who aren't able to compete with those machines. We need a fundamental solution to this problem because it's only going to get more and more so as time goes on, unless we all want to be really well-paid beauticians or people that tell you look really nice today. There are not many things that an artificial intelligence or a robot aren't going to be able to do in the near future. And as soon as the capital investment is enough to buy all those robots, create all those machines, we're going to be in some serious social trouble. So we need to have a solution ready to go. Universal basic income offers an answer to those challenges, and it uses that automation, that incredible wealth-generating machine, as a mechanism by which is going to pay for that. So basically, a lot of people have talked about it like an AI tax or robot tax. You're going to tax the machines and the productivity of this capital in order to pay a supplemental income for everybody in the economy so that they can have their basic needs met of food and shelter and things like that. So that's the idea. So I'm asking you to look for the future, not just evaluate it as today. Now, it could be that there are fundamental problems with this system and this idea, and it just won't work, and that's worth considering. But I don't want to just look at today's economy and today's world, because this is a problem that we already see echoes of this problem. We see the erosion of the middle class. We see the incredible disparity between the very wealthiest and the poorest in our economies. We need to do something about these problems, and we try to address that haphazardly. This is a much more broad overall solution looking forward. Now, flight is a problem, and again, this is it says governments, right? So we're gonna have the idea that as the world develops and more countries develop, they're going to reach these solutions, come up with these problems. Because we're technological dynamos in this country, the wealthy countries will be able to implement this first. We may have to do it gradually. We may have to introduce partial UBIs where you get, say, a $500 payment to start with, and then we can slowly increase it over time. But even small payments give people flexibility in their life. Two
things. First, I'm going to ask you one question and pass over the mic right back to you. And the question is this. Why is it more pertinent and less wasteful to distribute money to everybody rather than those who are in desperate need of capital? Why should we give money to 100% of the population when it would truly benefit 20% and the other 80% it would have only a marginal impact and an astronomically higher cost? The only second other thing is I can't see you. You're just a black screen going around right now. So that's not a big problem, but I thought you'd let you know.
Okay, that's strange. The mic looks good on my side, so I don't know the technical problem. Two things. One, it's a question of fairness. A lot of people complain about welfare systems that basically lazy people are getting money and I get nothing. This way, everybody gets an equal share of the contribution. And so it's a matter of fairness at that point. People's circumstances could change, et cetera. It also eliminates the administrative costs because basically there are none. You just have to electronically transfer money into accounts. That's it, right? So it's a lot more efficient and it's a lot more egalitarian. As far as the costs go, and it's kind of moot because look, if you're Bill Gates and you contribute your tax money, you get back some small portion of that. You could get rid of the portion that he gets back, but that would just mean you would tax him less. So it's kind of moot, really, at that point, right? It's not a zero-sum game. You take the money away and then you recredit to his account. You could have just not done that transfer, but whatever. That just keeps the system nice and easy. We tax, we put the money out there, everybody gets it. So it's just a much simpler system and it's much easier. If you say you're a rich person, well, no, I'm not going to go into all that. I'll pass it back.
Fair enough. Simply, I see you again, by the way, so that's good. I refuse to drive the economy into the ground by providing money to those who don't need it for the sole reason of keeping the rich happy. And I feel that this is by far the more acceptable stance. There's no need to distribute to the wealth to those who have it. There are people who desperately need this wealth. Capital is limited. It is not unlimited. It can grow, but our current capital is in a limited state. So we should try to distribute this capital as effectively as we can to attack inequality at its root, rather than simply saying we should eliminate bureaucracy by giving it to everyone. This is just a stance that is taking the lazy route rather than building effective welfare programs that will truly benefit people who need it most by distributing capital in a fair and reasonable manner.
Well, consider it this way. I could tax you $50 and give you $5 back, or I could tax you $45. Which do you prefer? It really doesn't make any difference. So if I tax Bill Gates, the extra money I need to pay Bill Gates, or I could just not collect the money from Bill Gates, it's the same difference, makes no difference. So it's really just a perception and a sense of egalitarianism that does that. And the idea that, today Bill Gates might be worth $1 billion. He doesn't need the payment, but he's, just swapping it in his taxation. Or tomorrow, maybe he goes completely broke and he needs that money to rebuild his business. And then he has it there for him and he's not paying the tax. So I think it's pretty simple. It's not really extra expenditure because money is cyclical. It just comes right back to him.
Forced charity to help those who are entirely unable to help themselves, such as the young, sick, and old, is morally justifiable. When forced charity is used to aid those who are easily able to be self-sufficient, the moral high ground of a welfare state dissolves. Because at this point, we're not truly looking out for the best interests of our citizens. We're trying to provide an egalitarian system that instead of providing equity and resources to those who need it most, we're simply going off the base that equality trumps equity, and that efficiency should be held of way higher precedence than actual results. Because the thing is, you say that we won't take as much money if we don't give some back from somebody such as Bill Gates. That is fair under the status quo. That is the instance. But say we double taxation, like radical, yes. But if we double taxation and redistribute to the bottom, say even 50% of the population, there's no doubt that will have a more immediate, jarring, and positive impact and implications on the economy, the capital, and the growth than if we give that to everyone. There's no way that will not be better in both the short and the long term. The fact is, the The issue is the universal. This universalization of money that does not need to be universalized. Like compartmentalization of money has existed for a long time for a reason, because it helps those in need rather than trying to have a egalitarian approach where we help everyone, even those who don't need to be helped. There's no sense in helping people who do not need to be helped. And people would argue that UBI will eliminate the welfare state, but a welfare state is a welfare state by any other name. You could also argue, if you want to go to the exact opposite end of the spectrum, that all welfare is inherently unethical, and that no government should truly have the right to redistribute another person's hard-earned capital for their own needs. A person has the right to what they earn in every instance. There is no reason that I should be forced to pay for programs that I do not partake in. And even though people always suggest that it is important to have others' best interests at heart, that is true, but that should be a voluntary exercise. And there's no reason to just turn this over to the hands of the government, to give them that much more centralized power and say,
well, if you're an ethical libertarian, there's not much I can do for you in these instances. But if you want a society where everybody has an equal shot at the dream and is free to work as much as their value will allow, but not starve if they happen not to compete successfully with the automation of the future, then I think UBI is a good direction to look. It's been a pleasure to debate you, and you get the final 3 minutes.
So even if I were a socialist like you, I would, or you at least in this debate, I would argue that not necessarily the status quo, but a welfare state in which distribution is given to those who are considered to need it most, such as single mothers, elderly people, the sick, the mentally unstable. We would simply be investing less money, so therefore having an economically better system, and helping people who need it more to a higher degree than we would be if we were trying to give welfare to everyone. So therefore we are in a socially better instance. So the universalization of basic income is the biggest issue with UBI, not the basic income. We can help people, but the fact is UBI is helping people who do not need to be helped. And when we do this, we are simply ignoring or insufficiently helping a large portion of our population. This cannot stand. I would even argue that it is unethical. It is unethical to give less money than we can in an economic sense to people who need it and favor others who do not. It is simply largely socially unethical to help the rich while helping the poor, but not helping them as much as you could. Not to mention my earlier contentions on economic viability. Although this may be important for the future, as you said, the resolution before us today is that governments should institute a universal basic income. That would suggest going forward, UBI being the law of the land, if you will. That's a bit much, but you see what I'm saying. So, and the fact is that if we do this currently, the point of singularity is quite far in the future. Estimates argue between 30 and 300 years. So the fact is, it's not an immediate issue. And when we try to absolve it immediately now, it's simply redundancy. It's redundancy and economic drain that we do not need till we get there. So until we get to a state where AI is truly taking over, we are simply implementing an economic system that is driving our economy to the ground steadily year after year and not helping those who truly need to be helped. So as far as I can see it, UBI is one thing, and that is an economic system that is economically inviolable in both the short and long term, and a system that promotes social inequality at its very best. Yeah.